My name is Nikki Adams. I'm from the English Collective of Prostitutes, which is a network of sex workers working at various levels of the sex industry. That includes women working on the street, in clubs, and in premises of different kinds. We campaign for decriminalisation, for safety, and for improved working conditions and for rights. We also campaign for financial alternatives to prostitution in the form of housing, benefits, higher wages, so that sex workers can leave prostitution if they want. We spearheaded the campaign against the Policing and Crime Act, which brought in new regulations for the licensing of lap dancing clubs, which the interview that follows this by Vera deals with. She speaks of the impact of that law on women working in the clubs, which is something that has not been properly considered by local authorities when they issued their consultation papers and when they're considering changing the licensing system. Can you say briefly what measures would actually improve your working conditions and your safety and your welfare as a worker?
Well, I think the fact that we are being monitored and controlled is like we should be monitored and controlled to be protected, if any case, but not to be scrutinized and judged by other people who don't work in the industry and don't understand how the industry works. And I also think that the dancers are being the ones more affected by this new law, because we're getting less private dance, we're getting less customers, but we still are having to pay the same house fee. Nobody's regulating that aspect. And I can say that some clubs, they make like you can pay between 10 and 90 or 100 pounds one shift a day. Sometimes some of the guests, they're not making that money now, so they end up paying from their pockets because there are no customers, because they have the feeling they're doing something wrong or against the law.
We wanted to find out from you, as somebody who works as a dancer, how the legislation brought in 2009 under the Policing and Crime Act to change the licensing of lap dancing clubs, how that has had an effect on you as a dancer. So could you start by saying when you started dancing and what you have seen in terms of that kind of change?
Yeah, well, I've been dancing for the last 10 years of my life. I've been dancing in Soho, in peep shows. I've been dancing in other clubs also in Soho, but lately I started dancing in a club in Hackney. And when I started dancing there, all the girls, they were saying that the business was really low, really down. Every day there are less and less customers. Last Christmas, for instance, there was about 50 girls working. Now there are only about an average of 20 every shift, because they're not making money enough to survive anymore.
And who are the women that are working with you?
Well, there are a lot of migrants, there are mothers, there are students, there are like all sorts of different women.
And for you, why did you decide to do this kind of work rather than another kind of job?
Well, when I started in a peep show in Soho, I was starting my photography course. So I could choose the days I was working. So that gave me total freedom to have to start my studies that lasted for about 6 years, because I ended up going at the university and everything. At the beginning, I was taking English course at the same time. Then I focused more and more on my photography. So it's a work that gave me freedom to realize myself as a woman.
And could you tell us concretely how the regulations that were brought in under the Policing and Crime Act that local authorities have implemented, how that has changed the working conditions, and whether you consider it to be an improvement or to have made your conditions of work worse?
Well, definitely it has made my working conditions much worse because obviously striptease and lap dancing is part of the adult entertainment industry. But since this law came in, you know you're filmed on camera while you're dancing. There is also normally a big security guy checking that by no means you touch at all the customer. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, I remember one time the light went off at the club. Many people went there to have a private dance because you can get a moment of intimacy that lasts for 3 minutes, and it's an adult consentment thing. Straight away the security came and said, oh, bear in mind that the CCTV can also see in darkness, or you're completely checked. That creates a funny, not funny, it's how can I say, you're working in fear and you're trying to entertain somebody, but you're also being completely checked and controlled. So it's just not working because they're trying to put us in our minds that we are doing something wrong. Well, I think I'm not doing anything wrong, and the client is not doing anything wrong if they want to go for a dance.
That's really true. They are talking about extending the regulations that they've introduced in Hackney in other areas. For example, Westminster and Camden are considering similar restrictions. What would you say to those local authorities that they should consider when they're looking into changing the regulations?
Well, I think it's going to affect a lot of women, mainly mother students, as I was. I don't know, people with family and needings. They're going to make our situation worse and worse, and they're not protecting us as workers either. They're just making things more difficult for us. So I wonder where all these women will end up if they've got no jobs. It's a decent income that you can make sometimes in a strip club while you work in a strip club. Sometimes it's not, but it's not mainly because we're being controlled and not recognized as workers.
That's really important too. The last thing is that one of the reasons they give for clamping down on lap dancing clubs is that they cause a nuisance to the public. What would you say in response to that?
Well, very recently I had a client who was a policeman, at the club. After a few drinks he confessed it. He was enjoying so much. So I mentioned to him, okay, what do you think about this new law coming? And he was like, okay, would you like to have your family in front of the club? Well, I think in the club where I work, it's completely, you don't know what's going on behind. It's completely private, obviously you don't go outside of the club with your loosey clothes at all. Whatever happens behind the doors is entirely up to us. So I found, a case of double morality. People say one thing, but then they do another one. Because he was staring at my breasts while he was making that assumption, and I thought it was really unfair. Because I don't think any of the children that live in the area where I work, they know that it's actually a strip club. While there is, for example, pubs, they can be more noisy, more open doors. Mainly public they've got generally is men, and they can also drink. They want to put the stigma on us. They don't say anything about pubs and things like that. So I think we're doing better than some pubs around everywhere.